Hi there. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's Hawks Aloft education video. We're doing things pretty similarly to last week as I'm just presenting a topic, and this week's topic is common ravens. So this is an exciting thing for me to talk about because I'm experiencing lots of common ravens in my field work right now. And so I think it's a good topic to discuss as they are a very widespread bird and something that I am experiencing a lot of. So let's get started. Before we go deep dive into ravens, I wanted to discuss one of the most commonly asked education questions that we get, which is what is the difference between a raven and a crow? And I think this is an important topic to cover because if you're learning all about ravens, you should learn a little bit about their family. So you can see in this side-by-side picture the obvious differences between ravens and crows and the obvious similarities. They look incredibly similar because they're both part of the corvid family. But the raven does have a lot of distinct features. Mainly, the biggest difference is that the ravens are a lot bigger than American crows. And ravens can get to be the size of a red-tailed hawk, whereas crows are much, much smaller. You can also see the raven has a thicker, bigger beak than the crow, whereas the crow has a thinner, kind of longer beak than the raven. And another really good way to identify a raven versus a crow is by their behavior, right? Because in this picture, they're sitting side by side, so nice next to each other. But in the field, or in birding, they probably won't ever be sitting right next to you for you to see those size differences. So for behavior differences, a good thing to notice is where the bird is. Common ravens are a little more aloof and they don't really like to be in highly populated human areas. Whereas crows are very readily using human habitats like cities for their habitats because there's lots and lots of food where there's lots and lots of humans. Ravens are also a little more isolated by themselves most of the times, whereas crows will be found in large flocks called murders of crows. And ravens, sometimes they'll be in pairs during the breeding season, maybe groups of 3 or 4 or 5, but that's pretty much it. They kind of like to be in less of a big social thing. And the last thing I'll say about the differences between our ravens and our crows is the way that they fly. Common ravens have longer tail feathers in the middle of their tail, and then shorter tail feathers on the edges of their tail. So it makes a kind of a triangle fan shape when they are in flight. Crows have the same length feathers all throughout the tail, and so it makes a kind of fan shape in their tail when they're in flight. So that's a really good way to tell as well when a bird is soaring above you, if it's a raven or a crow. So this is a picture brought to us by Birds of the World. It's a map of the raven nesting range. And the purple areas are areas that ravens are year-round inhabitants. And so you can see they're extremely widespread, and most of the time they are non-migratory birds. They will find food, nest, and live year-round in the same area. You can see on the edges of this map, there's a darker coloration as well as some orange in places. And those are areas where the birds will move if there's a shortage of food. But most of the time, it's a very short move, short migration, and they do return back to the area that they were originally in. So they're extremely widespread and can live in a ton of different environments, as you can see. So that brings us to where they're actually nesting in all those different environments. And that's really what my fieldwork has been focusing on is raven nest sites, as most of the fieldwork that I am conducting right now is about nest monitoring. So ravens are very, very adaptable in where they nest. Usually they'll nest in cliff sides or in trees, but if those are not available, they will readily nest on power line towers, telephone poles, billboards, bridges, railroad trestles, oil derricks, windmills, communication towers, and abandoned buildings. And one of my favorite places that I've heard of that ravens have nested was in the Mojave Desert. And they were actually using an old barbecue grill as their nest site. So they're very, very adaptable for where they nest. And you can see that in this picture. These are pictures I took on one of my surveys in western New Mexico. And this is actually right outside of Window Rock, Arizona. So it is quite on the border in McKinley County. And it is next to a major highway. You can't see any cars in that picture, but they are just zooming by at 70 miles, maybe less, 55 miles an hour during traffic. And so these ravens are nesting right next to the highway, and it doesn't seem to bother them at all. They can be sensitive to foot traffic, but once they're used to those cars going by, they don't really mind. And you can see in the picture on the right, there's a male and a female in that picture. The female, or we're assuming who is the female, is one of them is incubating those eggs and the other is standing perched in front of them. So that is, they're really adaptable to where they nest. And yeah, this is a nest that is probably a pretty good site. There's probably a lot of food next to that highway for those ravens. And so back to ravens and our surveying. Like I said, they are completely adaptable to where they nest. And these are some pictures, some more examples. One of our surveys this year, we have a pair of ravens nesting under a railroad trestle and under a bridge of a major highway. So these birds are really doing very, very successfully in that area. And McKinley County, where we're surveying, is actually in a very severe drought. And they have been since the end of 2016. And so the fact that these ravens are still thriving is really exciting, because we are looking for raptor nests as well for this project, but we have not found any, most likely due to that drought. And it could be that ravens are just a little more adaptable than our raptor friends that are out there, because they have an omnivore diet and can find food sources that maybe raptors would not be able to eat, as they have that carnivore diet. And monitoring the raven nests that are out there is really important, because in coming years, they could turn into or flip over to being raptor nests. This is an example of an active corvid nest of this year. And that would be a really great horned owl nest, maybe in the coming years, if a great horned owl decides to take it over. So thank you so much for tuning into our education video today. Please like and share this video. That gets us more viewers, and that's really what we're going for. So thank you so much.